Hi, welcome. Deja vu. My name is Amy Kaplan. I am a graduate of Columbia School of Social Work. I graduated in 2000, and I've recently returned from 13 years in Los Angeles. I handed in my last paper at Columbia, packed up my car, and drove to California. So I've been gone ever since I graduated. I just got back about 8 weeks ago. Actually, 36 hours before the blizzard. Thank you very much. That was an interesting homecoming. So I'm asking if anybody has questions to make sure that I answer them while we're here today. Now, some people wanted to know about the 5 course requirements post-graduation. Any other questions? Want to make sure I cover? No? Okay. And if you think of any, obviously, as we go along.
Is there anything transferable from here if they start shooting hours or in New York State?
Okay, so you want to talk about hours, counting for, okay. Anything else? Okay, so I'm going to pass out this. You can pass them to the back row. Got a couple. Hi. I forgot my handy dandy guide. Okay. So, the question, what do you do after you graduate if you're going back to California? The first thing you want to do is register with the Board of Behavioral Sciences. They're responsible for licensing social workers, MFTs, licensed professional counselors. There are certain things that you have to do when you get there, but I'm going to give you a packet before you leave so that you can start filling out the forms. There are a lot of forms to fill out. You also have to get fingerprinted. All licensed professionals in California have to be fingerprinted. And number 1 says live scan. That's the company that does that. The link that I have on the paper, it goes right to the locations where you can get fingerprinted. It takes a little while for that to go through. So I would recommend doing that really, very soon.
Are those only available in California, or do they have them across the country?
They have to be done in California by this agency. Yeah, they're very particular in California. Good question. The next thing you want to do is get your experience, right? So how do you do that? When you look for a job, I highly recommend asking if they have clinical supervision on site in their agency. If you have to get supervision outside your agency, it gets a little complicated because there are releases that you have to sign so that the person outside the agency can supervise you. If that's what you find, if you can't get that, just make sure that the agency that you're going to work for will allow that. You want to ask them, if you get outside supervision, if they don't provide it, will they sign the release so that somebody can supervise your hours? Had an incident a couple years ago where I thought that was all taken care of. I supervised somebody for 6 months. We went to file some paperwork with the board, and I couldn't get the agency to sign the release. So I highly recommend getting that all in writing if you have to get an outside supervisor.
Are there any, because that's not actually allowed in this state, are there any other rules attached to it? I know here, if there's payment involved or things like that, is there anything like that?
I don't think that it depends on payment.
Just the release piece?
It's just the release piece, so so you can actually talk about cases with that person that's not in the agency. That's their concern, confidentiality. Okay. Actually, since we're talking about supervision, let's do this. I'm going to pass out, this is it's called a responsibility statement for supervisors. Oops, I'm sorry.
Thanks.
They want to make sure that the person that's supervising you is licensed, has a current valid license. They have no sanctions against them. No felonies have come up since they got licensed. Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And this might be something that you want to go over with your supervisor before you start. In order to supervise associates in California, a person has to take a 15-hour supervision class after they're licensed. I would ask, and I think it's on here too. Yep. I would ask them where and when they do their supervision training. If you go down a little further, there's some questions. You want to ask them how many people they're supervising. Personally, I don't think I would want to work with somebody who's got 3 or 4 other supervisees that are going for their license and supervision responsibilities at their agency. That person is just not going to have the kind of time that you deserve to have. Supervision is a really important piece. All the things that you learned here in the last year or 2 years are going to start to look a little different when you actually go to work. And you want somebody that's going to be available to bounce things off of. Okay, and this is the form that you're going to go over with them. They ask for their license, and have you all seen the part of the website where you can verify licenses? The Board of Behavioral Sciences has a part in their website that says verify license. I would look for that person and make sure that their license is what's called clear. It's going to say L.C.S., and then it's going to say clear, hopefully. If it says anything besides clear after L.C.S., I would maybe not want to work with that person. Okay. About the hours, I'm going to go back to supervision in a minute, but about the hours, all of your hours have to be done in California. So, and I've had this happen with students a couple of times where they did start to work here, they decided they wanted to go back to California, and they had to start from 0. It takes about 2 or 2.5 years to complete all your hours. It's 3,200. And you have to have an hour of supervision for every 40 hours of work. There's a breakdown too that I'll give you guys. You can have individual supervision, you can have group supervision. Some of your hours can be supervised by a psychologist. I think it's a psychologist and MFT. I wanted all of my hours to be supervised by an L.C.S.W. I think we see things a little differently sometimes. I'm actually working in a building right now where I'm the only social worker. There's about 6 psychologists. So I'm pretty aware of how different we see things. Not a bad thing, but it's just different. We see things differently. Especially research, the research psychologists. So that's definitely different. Now, I'm going to go back to supervision in a minute. So there are these 5 classes. Is everybody aware of the 5 classes that you have to take after graduation? Is anybody not familiar with that? Okay, it's on here anyway. There are 5 classes that you need to take after you graduate. Sometimes the board will accept a class that's even close to those 5 classes. No matter what they tell you on the phone, I would still submit your transcripts. They might ask for the syllabus. You might want to send that along anyway. Things change, and it sometimes depends on who you talk to. I would always send in as much information as you can to see if the way that I had the substance abuse requirement waived because I had a number of hours of training in that. Remind me to go back to that. Will somebody remind me to go back to that because I did underline that for a reason? Okay. What else?
Can I ask you a quick question?
Absolutely.
So these classes, so if we took them here,
Mhm.
you're saying they wouldn't transfer?
Sometimes they will. That's why
There's no guarantee if we take the class here.
there's no guarantee. The good news is if they don't accept them, there are tons of online classes that will be approved by them, and they're very inexpensive now. There's a lot of competition for online classes, and they have their own their CEU classes. They have their own CEU providers approved. So that's part of the website as well. You want to look for approved CE providers. That's very important.
I mean, just for you as an FYI, since I went to school in the same area as you, but one thing that's really different for the students now is they have flat rates. So they can take unlimited up to 19.5 credits. So what we've been figuring out was in this, they can get like 5 out of 6 of these almost done before they go.
Mhm.
But whether or not they're accepted is another issue. Because
Right.
it's not like when we were doing it to each credit, each class, so we wouldn't have done that.
Mhm.
But, so that's what we've been working on, getting the syllabi for them, but this is good information.
That's great. In fact, UCLA is starting to do that. I taught the substance abuse class at UCLA when the first semester they started to do that. When they found out how cheap they could get it online, they changed that. They would rather have them take other classes. So, yeah. I think schools are kind of struggling with that back and forth in California because of this extra requirement.
They're just natural electives, you know. I mean, they're good courses to take in social experience.
Right.
That's why they're naturally in the curriculum.
Right. And maybe there's a way that we can find out on the other end of it how we can get those classes, what they would need for those classes to count. Maybe that's something we can talk about. Any other questions? Hi.
How many transferred for you? Because I see you took them all here too.
The 5 classes?
5 classes.
Just the substance abuse.
That was it.
That was the only one.
Did you take all 5?
I had to take the other 4. And I took them in person. The NASW California has CE fairs 3 or 4 times a year in different parts of the state where they give these classes. But for me, they were a little pricey. If they don't accept them, I would take them online.
NSAW actually offers them online. I've taken a couple of them.
Oh, great.
Specifically for California.
Okay.
You get a discount if you're an NSAW member.
Which is
They do cost on.
which is a lower, if you get your NASW membership right as a student, it's much less expensive. Other questions?
So you took all 5 of these classes here at Columbia?
Mm,
Unlikely, because like I said, we didn't used to have, you guys take a lot more classes than we used to take.
Yeah, we
paid
have
per
to,
class.
yeah.
So you take, you know, we took the bare minimum you needed to graduate, unless you somehow had all this extra money, which most people didn't. So it's a different era. The number, nobody graduated beyond, I mean, just in general speaking. I mean, I can't totally speak for you, but that's probably not your basis. It's up a long time ago, right?
I can't
Going back
remember.
2013 now versus 2000 graduation, you don't want to compare state legislation, right?
I don't know, and everything's about to change again. So please know that what we're talking about today may be a little different when you get there. I don't think that the extra classes are going to change, though. We'll talk about the change. Yeah, I could talk about the changes now. You know the DSM-5 is coming out, right, imminently. And I talked to the board yesterday. They are going to change their second exam. It's going to start in January, and they're not sure how it's going to change. I wouldn't worry about it right now, because like I said, you have a ways to go. You've got to get all your hours and then take the first exam. So, and I don't think the first exam is going to change.
Just to clarify, there's no like LN test, right? We just go with our MSW and then we start working towards our LC?
Right.
Okay.
Right. In California, there's only the associate, which is what you all will be when you get there and you register, and then the L.C.S.W. In different states, there are different levels. Most agencies are looking for the independent practice license, which is the L.C.S.W. in California. I know that the agency I work with, they accepted some people with an LMSW from New York. I think it depends on the agency. The independent practice license is always the one to go for.
Just have a question.
Sure.
This later, but as far as if I were to get my L.C.S.W. here, well, I'm getting my L.C.S.W. here, how does that transfer to California, or does it, in terms of, or do you, because I understand you have to go back and, can you practice as an L.C.S.W. while getting your hours, because you have to be supervised by the L.C.S.W. while you get the 3,200 hours again? Is that true, or is that how?
I'm not
Basically
sure.
starting from scratch?
Did everybody hear the question? Yes. What happens if you get licensed in New York and then you move back to California? I'm not sure. I'm doing that the other way around. I have my LCSW in California, and I'm actually living in Connecticut right now, and they won't grandfather me in until I'm licensed for 10 years, which I have a couple years to go because I didn't get licensed right away. Or I start from scratch, pretty much. But I work for a federal agency, which I can tell you guys about in a few minutes, and they don't care where you're licensed at the independent practice level, so I'm keeping my California license. I worked really hard for it. Do you want to talk about the first exam? Would that be helpful? Yes? Yeah? Okay. So the way it's set up now, there are 2 tests in California. There's the first one, which is multiple choice. It's 200 questions, and they give you about 4 hours to complete it. By the time you get to the point where you're taking this exam, you will know the clinical stuff. Absolutely. There's no doubt in my mind. You will have had the experience. You'll review it all. It's mostly out of the DSM, a lot of diagnostics. One word of advice. No matter what anybody tells you, do not feed into the drama around the exam process, because people do this notoriously. I've met very few people who don't do this. When you tell them that you're going for your hours, or you're studying for your exam, you will most often hear, oh, that was the worst thing I ever did. It was so hard. My friend had to take it 8 times. And I'm going to tell you what I did when I started to hear that. I realized that I was really feeding into this, and it was more of an emotional process than anything else. What I did was, as soon as I had all my hours and I was approved to take the first exam, I went and I took it cold, not studying at all. I wanted to get that experience out of the way. I only missed passing it by 9 points, which was also really exciting. It made me want to study. I didn't realize I was, going to be that close. It was the best $100 I ever spent, which is what it cost to retake it, because I got all that out of the way, all the test anxiety. I knew what I was studying for, and I had never heard anybody do that before. I had a couple people say that they'd done that after, and it was really helpful. If you think that might help you, absolutely do it. I did some other things to help through the second exam I can tell you about. The second exam, the way it's set up right now, is called clinical vignettes. Has anybody heard of that? Heard that term, clinical vignettes? No? So the way it's set up, it's 4 or 5 stories about, situations of family, older adults, a homeless person, and then there's 4 to 6 questions around that vignette. The answers are not multiple choice. They're multiple choice, but they're not, instead of 4 answers, they're 4 groups of answers, which sounds pretty basic, right? But what they do is they have overlap. So one of the 4 answers in the first group might be in one of the 4 answers in the third group, and then some in the second, but not in the fourth. It sounds very confusing. There are a number of programs now that teach you how to take the test. And again, it's going to have nothing to do with your clinical skills. If you get to the point where you have gone through graduate school, gotten all your hours, passed the first exam, you will know all the clinical questions that they're asking you. It's only a matter of learning how to take that kind of test. Right? And again, because they may do it in a similar way, please do not feed into the drama that you might hear. I did the same exact thing with the second test. As soon as I passed the first one, I registered. I took the second one cold, came very close to passing. I realized because you also have to time yourself, it's less time, fewer questions and answers, but they're a little more complicated. Did the same exact thing, went in, took it cold. I realized I could do it better than I thought. And the testing packages, they'll have, there are 2 major companies that have study guides and online testing, practice tests, and they make those harder than the actual exam itself. Does that make sense? So that you're over-prepared in that way. So there's a lot of help around taking these tests and the exams. And can I put this on here? If I forget to say this, my email's on here and my Skype name. I'm really committed to working with Columbia graduates. Really committed. You can call me anytime. You can email me anytime. If I'm not available that very second, I'll set up a time with you. This is what we do when we come to this school. This is for me, I don't know about you, this is a life commitment for me. I was saying before, I applied to Columbia on a dare. I never thought I'd get into this class. And I was like thinking, I hadn't got my answers back, and I'm like, oh, I promise, please, if I get in, I promise I'll help any student that ever needs help ever. And I know it's dramatic, but I'm trying to live up to that. It's a lot of fun, actually. I have a great time. And I hope you do too. I hope that the hours and the licensing process is a positive experience for you, that it's not something that you're dreading or, just overwhelmed by. It doesn't have to be like that. It can be a really great experience. I want to go back to one thing before I forget. You see the word substance abuse, the phrase substance abuse on here, and I underlined it? Okay. If this is aside from the how to get licensed thing, is that okay to do that for a minute? Is that okay? I don't know what kind of classes that you took here and how they address this now, but I will tell you one thing. If you use the term substance abuse, you will miss a tremendous cluster of other addictions. All right? And I hope that you open your eyes to it, because if you're trying to help people, and this is going to be a lot of the agency work that you do, we see a lot of people that have addictions, drugs, alcohol, pain medication. There's all kinds of things that they're cooking up now in people's basements. I don't know if you heard of bath salts and salvia and all this stuff. And what I see very often is people try to help somebody get sober, and they think the person's sober, but they're still kind of crazy, and they are not moving ahead in their life. And what happens is those people have now started gambling, spending 10 to 12 hours a day with video games and internet and all kinds of things that we can't test for. So if you look at substances and you don't look at the other stuff, life will be difficult. Okay, I'm done. That's my little soapbox moment. The class that I taught at UCLA, that's what we spent most of our time on, because I know that we get a lot of education about substance abuse and alcoholism and drug addiction, but we don't have a lot of education about interactive addictions. Okay, so enough said. Another thing, when you register with the board, make sure you use an address that's not your home address, because it's posted on their website. Really important point. Some places will let you use your agency. I got a P.O. box. It was well worth it to get that P.O. box, which I have one here now. They don't tell you that. Check the website after the DSM-5 comes out, see if there are any changes right away. I work at the VA. I work at the VA. I worked at the VA in Los Angeles for 5 years. If you want to work immediately, there's an agency called Social Service Professionals. That's it. The person's name is Meryl Stern, who runs it. She hires all the contract social workers for the VA. I've never met Meryl Stern. We've talked on the phone, I think, twice in 5 years, but I know that having worked at the VA, she hired all the contract social workers. And one of the ways to get into the federal system is to work contract first. Does anybody know what they want to do, what kind of work they want to do when they get back to California? I know you do. Go tell them.
I want to go into, I think we were discussing about the VA has a program where they work with formerly incarcerated veterans coming back into the community. So, I mean, part of that is because I grew up around the VA system, so I kind of want to go back. I want to get back into it. But also, my interest in general is just juvenile justice and criminal justice.
Anybody else know what they want to do?
Ideally, I would like to work at a clinic, a mental health clinic.
Mental health clinic, outpatient? That's a great first year job. You'll see a lot of different things. What's that?
That's what I'm at right now.
That's what you're doing now. That's a great first year job, because you're going to see all the things that they're going to ask you on these exams. Really good. Anybody else know what they want to do? And Department of Mental Health, I can show you how to apply if you don't know. Okay? Anybody else know what they want to do? Just work somewhere, somehow? Do you want me to tell you a little bit about getting a federal job? Yeah? Okay. So the website you want to go to, it's on here, www.usajobs.gov. You can put in social worker and the area. I would just put Los Angeles, and then it gives you a radius of like up to 200 miles, I think. And when you apply for a federal job, there are a ton of forms. Shocking, right? The one that you want to look at, and you can get this on the VA website, you can get this on USA Jobs website, and the number's down here at the very bottom. It says a 10-2850C. That's the one that's going to look most like a normal job application. You know, name, address, social, your registration, license, where you've worked before, all that stuff. Make one copy of that. Don't fill in the address or anything, the date or anything, so that you can copy that as many times as you want to, and you can fill in all the rest. That's the main one. You can actually fill that out online and save it in USA Jobs. Scan your transcripts, put them in there. When you get your registration from the BBS, scan that, put that in there. You create a USA Jobs account, basically. And then whenever these jobs come up, you have all that done. And you can just change the date on the big one. all right? Definitely email me before you submit any applications, because there are a couple other nuances that they don't tell you that will help process your application.
Yeah, we have students who intern at CUSSW, and we actually have one this year who was a head social worker who oversees all VA social workers. And, so the key thing that when they spoke with the HR is the keywords, because it's all electronically done, how they map their, things are in USA Jobs, and then they have certain keywords, and that's how they pull resumes.
Mhm.
Do you know, can you tell us what some of those keywords are for social work jobs, or is it highly dependent on each job and it's better to contact you?
Yeah, definitely contact me. I think what they're talking about is something called KSAs, which is knowledge, skills, and abilities. There's 5 or 6 essay questions. And there is a trick to answering those. There are websites now that will tell you how to answer KSAs appropriately. Some of the jobs aren't asking for them right now. I just want to tell you why I'm highlighting the VA, not just because I work there. The VA is the largest employer of social workers in the country. I think we have 8,000 social workers right now. Did you have a question or something? Oh, sorry. Right. When you apply for a government job, there's a grid that shows you the salary rates, and that's on a website from the Office of Personnel Management, opm.gov. And on one side of the grid is called a GS level, and going across are steps. GS level is kind of based on your experience and your education. Right out of graduate school, jobs that you'll be eligible for, mostly 9/11. GS grade, 9/11. You're always step 1 when you start. Once you're there for a year, you'll be just a regular 11. And then there's a formula to it. The first 3 years you get a step automatically. If you get a certification in something special, which I highly recommend, so that you stand out a little bit, you can get a step for that. They used to have cost of living raises. We haven't had one since 2009. It's a great, great place to work. Great job security. In 2007, I went from a nonprofit that was having furloughs and layoffs and downgrading and all kinds of things. I went from that to a very rock solid, stable, steady job. It's a great place to work, great benefits, great training. I can't say enough about it. And any federal agency, most federal agencies are going to be like that. Once you get into that, you can look at jobs. They have job openings in Homeland Security, other federal agencies. Any kind of federal agencies, those jobs are going to be listed on USA Jobs. But the VA is the largest employer of social workers. Questions? You guys are quiet. Yes.
I came in a little late, so I don't know if you already guessed this.
That's okay.
But I was wondering if, let's say, after I graduate Columbia, I decide to stay a year in New York before heading back to California, how does it work if I start working on hours here and then trying to transfer it back, or would that be just like a throwaway, well, not a throwaway year?
It is.
Okay.
It is. Yeah, you have to do all of your hours in California. Yeah. I know. And it's a big decision, I understand. You know, a lot of people spend 2 years here, they fall in love with New York, they decide they want to stay, but they're not sure, you know, because of this licensure issue, that they'll stay long enough to get licensed here, and then I don't think it's reciprocal. We talked about that. I can look that up. Other questions? I feel like I've missed a lot of things. Can anybody think of anything that they are curious about, or?
I guess even though it's not necessarily transferable, does Hubsy talk to the ages?
I don't know. Like, you know, I would still, no matter what they tell you, if you called them, I would still send in a syllabus and you know, any description, anything, any information you can give them about that class. You might get somebody on a day where they're like, oh, okay, we'll just let it go. You know, I mean, it can be very subjective. I know, right? Please.
And when did you send the syllabus? I mean, when in the process, that's what I mean.
When in the process? I think once you're registered, once you have a registration number, and you get a little certificate, it looks like a license. It looks exactly like a license, but it says associate. As soon as you have that number, I would send that in. That's a really good question. Send your transcripts and any syllabus from any of the classes that you think might count.
Can you, like for aging, for example, can you combine like two different classes that focus on aging to meet those hours or no?
I would doubt it. I would doubt it, but send it in. What's the worst they can do?
What's the class here that fulfills this aging dementia? Or,
Do you think enough? I don't know what the classes are now, but we can certainly look at it.
Specific clinical courses that address these may cover it, but we tell each student the exact same thing you're saying. The person who can really answer this is the person who works for the state. I mean, and we're really lucky to leave here to give advice today, but, you know, all of you have to be responsible to get the answer. I would say always in writing if possible. A lot of times, most of the time they won't do that. I mean, if they're anything like the New York State officials. But that's what you've got to do. But it's not, HUSSW does not generally count for that. It's not extensive enough because it's only a small portion of the class. So you have to look at the advanced clinical courses that cover aging and see if one of those will cover it.
As close as you can get.
It's a very important question. It's not a question, it was actually a request. Because it's being recorded, they asked that you use the mics so that they can pick up the questions so that other students can hear. Sorry. Yeah.
Okay. What I thought was really helpful when I was looking on to take courses, like I'm a second year, so if you're a first year, this might be helpful, is that they have a list of like California schools and what classes qualify from like UCLA or like something like that. And so then you can kind of cross-check like that's when I decided to take the dementia course because they had a couple that they said counted from like California schools, which obviously, like you said, doesn't guarantee anything, but it'll help you get, like for the spousal abuse, a lot of them were like the domestic violence courses or like that sort of thing. So I thought that was helpful at least to like look at what they have accepted in the past, I guess.
That's really helpful, and I'm glad you said that because what I would suggest is if you are denied and you took a class that you saw was very close to one at UCLA or USC, I would send them information for both classes and have them explain to you why yours was denied. I'd push them a little bit, okay? Yes?
Are there any time limits from when you graduate to when you can get your hours? Because I know for the L.S.W, if you have like 5 years until you can't get it anymore.
Right.
So I'm wondering if California has any sort of like time limits from the point where you graduated to where you start doing your hours and to where you can get your license if they have like an expiration.
There's a time, once you're registered, I think you have, don't quote me, I think it's 6 years, and then you have to get, kind of negotiate with them why it's taken that long, once you're registered, okay?
But before that?
Before you're registered, nothing, they don't really care about you. Nothing personal. Nothing personal, they don't really care. Yeah, once you register, once you have your registration number, you can start clocking those hours. And before you leave, by the way, I have, I don't know that they're in I have the registration packet, and I also have supervisory plans and the grid about how you get your experience in which areas, and a tracking log and all that stuff that you can get on the website, but I just made you copies.
Do you think it's a good idea, like, if we're planning on going to California and since we're already here, to take the L.S.W in New York? Or just, it doesn't really do anything for you in California, like, something to add on the resume?
You have to be, well, I think that's a personal choice. You might want to register, you may not end up going to California. So you don't want to kind of waste that time. So if you're going to be here for a while, I would start that here. Can't hurt, right?
So, can you register to become licensed without having the additional coursework already completed?
Yes.
You could, right?
Yes.
Okay.
You send that, you want to prove to them that you took those classes before you sit for the exam, but you want to try to negotiate with them early, so you know if you have to take them or not. Good questions. These are all good.
Do agencies hire you before you're registered?
Some will,
Okay.
but I'll tell you right now, there are so many people that are registered that they would more likely hire somebody that is. Somebody in the back have a question?
Yeah, I had a similar question about just hiring process. So I'm planning to move back to California, but does it benefit me at all to take the LM here just for hiring, for higher salary or anything more desirable?
I would doubt it.
Doubtful.
I can't tell you for sure because it's going to depend on the agency.
Mm-hmm.
But if you definitely are going back, I would do everything there then.
Okay.
Yeah. Hi.
I'm wondering about like wait time for how long it takes them, I guess, to sort of get when you first register, if there's any type of wait or turnover. I had spoken with a friend who said there was like a huge lag time, and I don't know if it was that first step or maybe the second, but a lag time in terms of them, I guess, approving it and then you being able to sort of start your hours. Do you have any advice about that? Do you know anything about that?
I do. The thing that's going to take the most time is your live scan, is your fingerprints. Okay, so I would get that done immediately. It takes them about 60 days to get them approved. Mine came back like 3 or 4 times. I don't know, somebody flipped the wrong switch or I looked like a criminal or something.
Other than that, is there anything else like in terms of that, the ASW, in terms of waiting?
No, I would
It's
just
pretty
fill out
instant.
all this paperwork, have it all ready to go, get your live scan. I waited, so, from my experience, I would tell you and encourage everybody not to wait.
We can't get hired until the last one was through,
You can get, well, we were saying like some agencies will hire you if you're not registered, like maybe show them the paperwork, copy everything, by the way, save copies of everything. They might, if that's an agency question, yeah. Yeah, great.
For the child abuse assessment and reporting course, I thought I read somewhere that said you have to take that one specifically in California. Is that true? And is it a course or is it the thing to get mandated? Or to be mandated report?
I don't remember reading that anywhere, and I looked this over again, and I called the board just to make sure.
You do, because the laws are different.
So it's a course.
Yeah, because what you're required as a social worker in New York is completely different.
Oh, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying. Yes,
It's mostly about,
the specific laws.
mostly about the time that you're supposed to report in New York versus California.
They're very similar, but
You mentioned something before where you said that you'd have to take the substance use course because you had enough work experience
Yes.
in order to not have to take it.
yes.
I'm an alumni of the program, just taking a class, so I do have years of experience in substance use. So I'm wondering, how did you do that, or what was that? Or was it, was that?
Yeah, I got all the documentation I could. By the time I registered and sent all my paperwork in and did all the stuff that I wish I had done when I graduated, I had had 3 or 4 years experience and taken the class. They took my class from here, I think. And I was certified alcohol and drug counselor and all that stuff, so. Yeah, just send them everything. Just send it all. Hopefully they'll get through half the paperwork and go, oh, just give it to her.
Sorry. I just want to clarify about the fingerprints, just for not the people graduating, but future students coming through. So the steps are registration and fingerprinting, or are they allowed to fingerprint in advance of registering? Because they can't register until they've graduated, right? Is that
Right.
correct?
You can't register until you graduate.
And can they
I
do
think I
like,
send you transcripts with it.
right, if they went home during their winter break, let's say their final year, could they do the fingerprinting then? Or
think
during
the-
spring break, or do they have to wait until they've graduated?
The fingerprints are only good for
Okay, oh yes, the time.
a certain amount of time.
Okay. So maybe the spring break time, if they're allowed to do it in advance, they could do it?
I would
If that's-
double check.
Okay. So they should just, okay, so
Well, look, yeah,
Okay.
spring break might be, but it might be only 3 months. I don't know.
then it wouldn't, so it's probably ultimately best just to wait till you graduate,
Right.
even though that's the rate determining step. Okay,
Because
thank you.
commit a crime after you fingerprint. Believe me,
No
it has
crimes.
happened.
No
It
crimes
has
after
happened. When you
graduating.
when you go to that verify license section of, just pick out some names. I mean, it's interesting. Or Google some like social work crimes, or something. You'll see what people do. It's interesting. That's why they're really careful. They want to make sure that everybody's, nobody's a sex offender. And the other thing too is when now that's maybe down the road, actually they might do it for original registration. If you owe the state of California any money in taxes, you will not get your registration or your license. That's brand new. I had to think for a minute when I saw it because I'm about to renew. I was like, oh my gosh, did I pay my, oh yeah, good. Yeah. California's really strict about a lot of things, so you want to make sure you have everything, right?
Do you know anything about like getting a job at a hospital?
Like hospitals in general.
Because like I've heard it's really difficult to get a job in one in California, and so I'm just wondering if you know anything about that.
I haven't heard about anything difficult in just getting a job, or you have to have more experience to get a hospital job. Again, I think that's going to depend on the hospital, not at the VA. Other questions? Yes.
Was it difficult for you to find like supervision? I know other people who have had to pay to get their supervision hours and things like that. So
Yeah. I think one of the reasons I didn't go for the license right away is because I was living in the desert of California, and I was working for an agency that had no L.C.S.Ws. And I didn't know if I was going to stay in California. But when I got to LA, I had learned that it was important to have somebody that could sign off on your hours. And I don't know if I said this before, but if you are a contract social worker, if you get a contract job to start with, some agencies will not let L.C.S.W. sign off on hours unless you're a full-time employee. So I would check that out with your agency. That's tragic. That's the thing that I might have talked about that because that's what happened. Yeah. Imagine, like, she had like 1,000 hours that didn't count. Yeah. Is that it?
Just in the world we live in, where contract is so much more common.
Right. Right. But hopefully they'll all get full-time jobs with great supervision. Okay. Yes? Can you turn on your mic?
If you're working at an agency and get a certain amount of hours there and then wind up getting a new job elsewhere, I imagine all your hours are still completed, whether it's done with the same supervisor or not.
Yes, but
So-
definitely have the supervisor sign all your paperwork and your hours before you leave that agency.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to put out packets and forms, and I'll be around if you guys want to chat. And like I said, my email's on there. Feel free to contact me at any time, before, during, after. Let me know when you passed. That's always fun to find out. And thank you.